few nights after meeting Roy and Herman, I used one of the syrups, which was my first experience with junk. A syrup is like a toothpaste tube with a needle on the end. You push a pin down through the needle, the pin punctures the seal, and the syrup is ready to shoot. Morphine hits the backs of the legs first, then the back of the neck, a spreading wave of relaxation slackening the muscles away from the bones that you seem to float without outlines, like lying in warm salt water. As this relaxing wave spread through my tissues, I experienced a strong feeling of fear. I had the feeling that some horrible image was just beyond the field of vision, moving as I turned my head, so that I never quite saw it. I felt nauseous. I lay down and closed my eyes. A series of pictures passed like watching a movie. A huge neon light cocktail bar that got larger and larger until streets, traffic and street repairs were included in it. A waitress carrying a skull on a tray, stars in the clear sky. The physical impact of the fear of death, the shutting off of breath, the stopping of blood. I dozed off and woke up with a start of fear. Next morning I vomited and felt sick until noon. Roy called that night. About what we were discussing the other night, he said. I could go about $4 per box and take 5 boxes now. Are you busy? I'll come over to your place. We'll come to some kind of agreement. A few minutes later he knocked on the door. He had on a Glen plaid suit and a dark coffee-coloured shirt. We said hello. He looked around blankly and said, If you don't mind, I'll take one of those now. I opened the box. He took out a cigarette and injected it into his leg. He pulled up his pants briskly and took out $20. I put 5 boxes on the kitchen table. I think I'll take them out of the boxes, he said. Too bulky. He began putting the cigarettes in his coat pockets. I don't think they'll perforate that way, he said. Listen, I'll call you again in a day or so after I get rid of these and have some money. He was adjusting his hat over his asymmetrical skull. I'll see you. The next day he was back. He shot another cigarette and pulled out $40. I laid out 10 boxes and kept 2. These are for me, I said. He looked at me, surprised. You use it? Now and then. It's bad stuff, he said, shaking his head. The worst thing that can happen to a man. We all think we can control it at first. Sometimes we don't want to control it. He laughed. I'll take all you can get at this price. Next day he was back. He asked if I didn't want to change my mind about selling the 2 boxes. I said no. He bought 2 cigarettes for $1 each, shot them both up and left. He said he had signed on for a 2-month trip. During the next month I used up the 8 cigarettes I had not sold. The fear I had experienced after using the first cigarette was not noticeable after the third, but still from time to time after taking a shot I would wake up with a start of fear. After 6 weeks or so I gave Roy a ring, not expecting him to be back from his trip. Then I heard his voice on the phone. I said, Say, do you have any to sell of the material I sold you before? There was a pause. Yes, he said. I can let you have 6, but the price will always have to be $3 per. You understand I don't have many. Okay, I said. You know the way. Bring it on over. It was 12 1/2 grain tablets in a thin glass tube. I paid him $18 and he apologized again for the retail rate. Next day he bought 2 grains back. It's mighty hard to get now at any price, he said, looking for a vein in his leg. He finally hit a vein and shot the liquid in with an air bubble. If air bubbles could kill you, there wouldn't be a junkie alive. Later that day, Roy pointed out to me the drugstore where they sold needles without questions. Very few drugstores will sell them without a prescription. He showed me how to make a collar out of paper to fit the needle to an eyedropper. An eyedropper is easier to use than a regular hypo, especially for giving yourself vein shots. Several days later, Roy sent me to a doctor with a story about kidney stones to hit him for a morphine prescription. The doctor's wife slammed the door in my face, but Roy finally got past her and made the doctor for a 10 grain script. The doctor's office was in junk territory on 102nd off Broadway. He was a doddering old man and could not resist the junkies who filled his office and were, in fact, his only patients. It seemed to give him a feeling of importance to look out and see an office full of people. I guess he had reached a point where he could change the appearance of things to suit his needs, and when he looked out there he saw a distinguished and diversified clientele, probably well dressed in 1910 style, instead of a bunch of ratty-looking junkies coming to hit him for a morphine script. Roy shipped out at 2 or 3 week intervals. His trips were army transport and generally short. When he was in town, we generally split a few scripts. The old croaker on 102nd finally lost his mind altogether, and no drugstore would fill his scripts, but Roy located an Italian doctor out in the Bronx who would write. I was taking a shot from time to time, but I was a long way from having a habit. At this time I moved into an apartment on the Lower East Side. It was a tenement apartment with the front door opening into the kitchen. I began dropping into the Angle Bar every night and saw quite a bit of Herman. I managed to overcome his original bad impression of me, and soon I was buying his drinks and meals, and he was hitting me for squash change at regular intervals. Herman did not have a habit at this time. In fact, he seldom got a habit unless someone else paid for it, but he was always high on something: weed, benzodrine, or knocked out of his mind on goofballs. He showed up at the Angle every night with a big slab of Pollock called Whitey. There were 4 Whiteys in the Angle set, which made for confusion. This Whitey combined the sensitivity of a neurotic with a psychopath's readiness for violence. He was convinced that nobody liked him, a fact that seemed to cause him a great deal of worry. One Tuesday night, Roy and I were standing at the end of the Angle Bar. Subway Mike was there and Frankie Dolan. Dolan was an Irish boy with a cast in one eye. He specialised in crummy scores, beating up defenceless drunks and holding out on his Confederates. "I got no honour," he would say. "I'm a rat," and he would giggle. Subway Mike had a large, pale face and long teeth. He looked like some specialised kind of underground animal that preys on the animals of the surface. He was a skillful lush worker, but he had no front. Any cop would do a double take at sight of him, and he was well known to the Subway squad. So Mike spent at least half his time on the island doing the 25-29 for jostling. This night Herman was knocked out on Nembies, and his head kept falling down onto the bar. Whitey was stomping up and down the length of the bar trying to promote some free drinks. The boys at the bar sat rigid and tense, clutching their drinks, quickly pocketing their change. I heard Whitey say to the bartender, "Keep this for me, will you?" And he passed his large clasp knife across the bar. The boys sat there silent and gloomy under the fluorescent lights. They were all afraid of Whitey, all except Roy. Roy sipped his beer grimly. His eyes shone with their peculiar phosphorescence. His long asymmetrical body was draped against the bar. He didn't look at Whitey, but at the opposite wall where the booze were located. Once he said to me, "He's no more drunk than I am. He's just thirsty." Whitey was standing in the middle of the bar, his fist doubled up, tears streaming down his face. "I'm no good," he said. "I'm no good. Can anyone understand I don't know what I'm doing?" The boys tried to get as far from him as possible without attracting his attention. Subway Slim, Mike's occasional partner, came in and ordered a beer. He was tall and bony, and his ugly face had a curiously inanimate look as if made out of wood. Whitey slapped him on the back, and I heard Slim say, "For Christ's sake, Whitey." There was more interchange I didn't hear. Somewhere along the line, Whitey must have got his knife back from the bartender. He got behind Slim and suddenly pushed his hand against Slim's back. Slim fell forward against the bar, groaning. I saw Whitey walk to the front of the door and look around. He closed his knife and slipped it into his pocket. Roy said, "Let's go." Whitey had disappeared and the bar was empty except for Mike, who was holding Slim up on one side. Frankie Dolan was on the door. I heard next from Frankie that Slim was okay. The croaker at the hospital said the knife just missed a kidney. Roy said, "The big slob. I can see a real muscle man, but a guy like that going around picking up dimes and quarters off the bar, I was ready for him. I was going to kick him in the belly first, then I got one of those quart beer bottles from the case on the floor and break it over his scunch. With a big villain like that, you've got to use strategy." We were all barred from the Angle, which shortly afterwards changed its name to the Roxy Grill. One night I went to the Henry Street address to look up Jack. A tall red-haired girl met me at the door. "I'm Mary," she said. "Come in." It seemed that Jack was in Washington on business. "Come on into the front room," he said, pushing aside a red corduroy curtain. "I talk to landlords and bill collectors in the kitchen. We live in here." I looked around. The bric-a-brac had gone. The place looked like a chop suey joint. There were black and red lacquered tables scattered around. Black curtains covered the window. A coloured wheel had been painted on the ceiling with little squares and triangles of different colours, giving a mosaic effect. "Jack did that," Mary said, pointing to the wheel. "You should have seen him. He stretched a board between 2 ladders and lay down on it. Paint kept dripping onto his face. He gets a kick out of doing things like that. We get some frantic kicks out of that wheel when we're high. We lay on our backs and dig the wheel, and pretty soon it begins to spin. The longer you watch it, the faster it spins. This wheel had the nightmarish vulgarity of Aztec mosaics, the bloody vulgar nightmare, the heart throbbing in the morning sun, the garish pinks and blues of souvenir ashtrays, postcards, and calendars. The walls were painted black, and there was a Chinese character in a red lacquer on the one wall. "We don't know what it means," she said. "Shirts 31 cents, I suggested. She turned on me, her blank cold smile. She began talking about Jack. "I'm queer for Jack," she said. "He works at being a thief just like any job. He used to come home nights and hand me his gun. Stash that. He likes to work around the house painting and making furniture." As she talked, she moved around the room, throwing herself from one chair to another, crossing and uncrossing her legs, adjusting her slip so as to give me a view of her anatomy in installments. She went on to tell me how her days were numbered by a rare disease. "Only 26 cases on record. In a few years I won't be able to get around at all. You see, my system can't absorb calcium and the bones are slowly dissolving. My legs will have to be amputated eventually, then the arms." There was something boneless about her, like a deep-sea creature. Her eyes were cold fish eyes that looked at you through viscous medium that she carried about with her. I could see those eyes in a shapeless, protoplasmic mass undulating over the dark sea floor. "Benzedrine is a good kick," she said. 3 strips of the paper or about 10 tablets. Or take 2 strips of Benny and 2 golf balls. They get down there and have a fight. It's good drive. 3 young hoodlums from Brooklyn drifted in, wooden-faced, hands in pockets, stylized as a ballet. They were looking for Jack. He had given them a short count in some deal. At least, that was the general idea. They conveyed their meaning less by words than by significant jerks of the head and by stalking around the apartment and leaning against the walls. At length, one of them walked to the door and jerked his head out. They filed out. "Would you like to get high?" Mary asked. "There may be a roach around here somewhere." She began rummaging around in drawers and ashtrays. "No, I guess not. Why don't we go uptown? I know several good connections we can probably catch about now." A young man lurched in with some object wrapped in brown paper under one arm. "Ditch this on your way out," he said, putting it down on the table. He staggered into the bedroom on the other side of the kitchen. When we got outside, I let the wrapping paper fall loose, revealing the coin box of a pay toilet crudely jammied open. In Times Square, we got into a taxi and began cruising up and down the side streets. Mary gave directions. Every now and then she would yell "stop" and jump out, her red hair streaming. And I would see her overhaul some character and start talking. "The connection was here about 10 minutes ago. This character's holding, but he won't turn loose of any. Later, the regular connection is gone for the night. He lives in the Bronx, but just stop here for a minute. I might find someone in Kellogg's." Finally, no one seems to be anywhere. It's a bit late to score. Let's buy some beanie tubes and go over to Ronnie's. They have some gone numbers on the box. We can order coffee and get high on Benny. Ronnie's was a spot near 52nd and 6th where musicians came for fried chicken and coffee after 1 p.m. We sat down in a booth and ordered coffee. Mary cracked a Benzedrine tube, expertly extracting the folded paper, and handed me 3 strips. Roll it up into a pill and wash it down with coffee. The paper gave off a sickening odor of menthol. Several people sitting nearby sniffed and smiled. I nearly gagged on the wad of paper, but finally got it down. Mary selected some gone numbers and beat on the table with the expression of a masturbating idiot. I began talking very fast. My mouth was dry and my spit came out in a round of white balls. Spitting cotton, it's called. We were walking around Times Square. Mary wanted to locate someone with a piccolo, Victrola. I was full of expansive, benevolent feelings and suddenly wanted to call on people I hadn't seen in months or even years. People I did not like and who did not like me. We made a number of unsuccessful attempts to locate the ideal piccolo-owning host. Somewhere along the line, we picked up Peter and finally decided to go back to the Henry Street apartment where there was at least a radio. Peter and Mary and I spent the next 30 hours in the apartment. From time to time, we would make coffee and swallow more Benzedrine. Mary was describing the techniques she used to get money from the Johns, who formed her principal source of revenue. "Always build a John up. If he has any sort of buddy at all, say, 'Oh, don't ever hurt me.' A John is different from a sucker. When you're with a sucker, you're on the alert all the time. You give him nothing. A sucker is just to be taken, but a John is different. You give him You give him what he pays for. When you're with him, you enjoy yourself and you want him to enjoy himself too. If you want to really bring a man down, light a cigarette in the middle of intercourse. Of course, I really don't mean like all men at all sexually. What I really dig is chicks. I've got a kick out of taking a proud chick and breaking her spirit and making her see she is just an animal. A chick is never beautiful after she's been broken. Say, this is a sort of fireside kick, she said, pointing onto the radio, which was the only light in the room. Her face contorted into an expression of monkey-like rage as she talked about men who accosted her on the street. Son of a bitch, she snarled. They can tell when a woman isn't looking for a pickup. I used to cruise around with brass knuckles on under my gloves just waiting for one of the peasants to crack at me.